I never meant for any of it to happen. When I boarded that cruise, I was just looking for a break. A solo vacation. No drama, no distractions. Just sun, overpriced cocktails, and a few days of pretending real life didn't exist. But then I met Eric. It was the second night on the ship. I was sitting alone at the piano bar, half watching the guy on stage belt out Billy Joel covers, while I sipped a gin and tonic. I remember I was wearing this stupid linen shirt I'd bought last minute, trying to look resort casual, even though I felt completely out of place. That's when Eric sat down next to me. "Is this guy trying to seduce us with, Piano Man?" he asked, raising an eyebrow, his lips tugging into a crooked smile. I laughed, and just like that, the whole night shifted. He had this warm, open energy that made everything around him feel lighter. Tan skin, dark hair, a voice like he was always half laughing, even when he wasn't. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He was from LA, worked in marketing, had done a bunch of these cruises with friends, but came alone this time to clear his head. I didn't press. And he didn't ask too much about me, which I appreciated. I'd just gotten out of something messy, and I wasn't exactly ready to unpack all of that, not on a boat full of strangers. Not with someone I'd probably never see again. At least, that's what I thought. The next morning, I saw him again at the buffet. He waved me over. We ended up sitting together for breakfast, and then lunch, and then somehow by mid-afternoon we were lying side by side on the top deck, half asleep under the Caribbean sun. He made me laugh, like really laugh. It wasn't just the flirting, it was how easy it felt. How he looked at me when I was talking like he was actually listening. How he'd brush my arm when he made a joke, and then pretend like it didn't mean anything. But it did. It definitely did. By the third day, it wasn't subtle anymore. He'd started lingering when we said goodnight. His hand would rest a little longer on my back. His eyes would linger on my lips for just a beat too long. And me? I didn't stop him. I didn't ask questions. I let myself fall into it, into him, because it felt too good to pull away. But there were signs. Small ones. He always turned his phone face down. Always paused before answering when I asked if he had anyone waiting back home. Once, late at night, we were sitting alone at the rear of the ship, watching the wake trail behind us, and I asked, half joking, "So what happens when the cruise ends?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I haven't figured that part out yet. I should have known. I should have asked, but I didn't. Instead, I kissed him. And he kissed me back." That night, we didn't go back to our separate cabins. We didn't talk about it the next morning either. We just woke up tangled together in a bed too small and a silence too big. But that afternoon, everything shattered. I was walking back from the pool when I saw him on the main deck, standing stiffly next to a woman dragging a suitcase. She had long, wavy brunette hair and big sunglasses and the kind of presence you just felt instantly. She leaned in and kissed him. I froze, stopped mid-step like I'd been hit with a wave. He didn't see me at first, but then he did. And the look on his face, guilt, panic, something else I couldn't name, was enough to make my stomach drop. That was the moment I learned her name, Claire, his fiancée. And she had come early. I didn't confront him right away. What was I supposed to do? March across the deck and cause a scene? In front of her? In front of everyone? Instead, I turned on my heel and walked as fast as I could without running. My heart was pounding in my ears, that sick adrenaline building in my chest like a storm. I made it back to my cabin, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to breathe. His fiancée. He had a fiancée. And not just in the abstract, not just a name or a story he forgot to mention. She was here, on the same ship, with the suitcase, smiling like she had no idea. I felt like I was going to throw up. I stared at my reflection in the mirror above the little vanity. My face looked off, flushed, tight, like someone I didn't recognize. My mouth opened a few times like I was about to talk to myself, but nothing came out. It all started to unravel in my head, every half answer he gave me. Every time his phone buzzed, and he silenced it without looking, the way he never talked about life after the cruise. How he deflected when I asked about the future. I'd ignored it all. Worse, I let myself believe the story I wanted instead of the one he was telling me in 1,000 quiet ways. I thought we had something, and maybe we did, but it had a clock on it from the beginning, and I was too far in to admit it. There was a knock at my door about an hour later. I didn't answer. Another knock. Then his voice, low and muffled through the door. "Daniel, can we talk? Please?" I stood there, frozen, just watching the doorknob, not moving, not breathing. "Daniel, I didn't know she was coming," he said. She wasn't supposed to be here, I swear." I didn't say anything. "She flew in early. It was a surprise." He laughed, bitterly. "Well, mission accomplished, I guess." Still, I said nothing, just kept staring at the wood like I could burn through it with my eyes. "I didn't want this," he said, his voice softer now. "I didn't expect to meet you. I didn't mean for anything to happen." And that was the moment I snapped. I yanked the door open, and there he was, hair tousled from the wind, sunglasses hanging from the collar of his shirt, his expression somewhere between desperate and ashamed. "Then why did you let it happen?" I asked, voice low but shaking. "Why kiss me? Why sleep with me? Why lie?" He looked at the floor. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you." "Right," I said, laughing without humor. "That makes it better. I was going to," he added quickly. "I swear. I couldn't figure out how." I stepped back, the door still half open. "So what now? You just pretend this didn't happen? Go on with her like everything's fine?" He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something crack in his eyes. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I haven't known for a long time." A beat passed between us. Then he added, "She thinks I'm straight." Those 4 words hit like a punch. "She's never known?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not fully. I think she suspects, sometimes. But I've never— You were the first." I swallowed hard. "The first what? The first guy? Or the first mistake?" "Don't say that," he said, reaching toward me. I stepped back instinctively. "She loves you," I said, voice tight. "You let her fly across the ocean to surprise you while you were sleeping in someone else's bed." "I know," he whispered. "I know." He looked wrecked. And somehow, that just made it worse. Because part of me still wanted to comfort him, still wanted to believe this wasn't who he really was. But maybe it was. "You need to go," I said finally. He didn't argue. He nodded once, slowly, then turned and walked down the corridor without another word. I closed the door behind him, locked it, and sat back on the bed. And then I cried. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet tears that slid down my cheeks without asking permission, as my chest ached in this dull, persistent way, like something had been carved out of me. I stayed in my room for most of the next day, ordered room service, skipped the shows, avoided the pool decks. I kept telling myself I was fine, that I had known this was temporary, that I was stupid for letting myself catch feelings. But none of that helped. The worst part? I missed him. I missed him, even when I hated him. That night, I finally got up the nerve to go for a walk. I needed air, movement, anything to shake the cabin fever. I threw on a hoodie and kept my head down, hoping not to see him or her. But of course, the cruise had other plans. As I turned the corner past the bar where we first met, I saw them, him and Claire, sitting together at a table, 2 half-empty wine glasses between them. She was talking, laughing about something, and he was smiling in that polite, slightly distracted way I now realized he did when his mind was elsewhere. When he saw me, everything about him changed. His smile faltered, eyes locking on mine. Claire noticed. She looked at me, then back at him. And that's when I knew. She didn't suspect. She knew. I didn't stop walking. I just kept going, past the bar, past the shuffleboard courts, past the couple arguing over deck chairs. I made it to the edge of the ship, hands gripping the cold metal railing, and stared out at the black ocean swallowing the horizon. But my heart was pounding. She knew. The way Claire had looked at me, too calm, too sharp, it wasn't the look of someone oblivious. It was the look of someone who'd already figured out the ending before the story was done being told. I stayed there until the wind numbed my ears, until my fingers ached from gripping the rail too hard. Then I went back to my cabin, shut the door, and told myself I'd ride this out. 4 more days. I could do 4 more days. The problem was, Eric didn't disappear. The next morning, I found him sitting at the far end of the breakfast buffet, alone. He wasn't eating, just stirring a glass of orange juice with this straw, staring down at the table like it had betrayed him. I didn't stop. I didn't say anything. But he saw me. Later that afternoon, I got a note slipped under my cabin door. Old school, handwritten, folded once. Please. 1 conversation. That's all I'm asking. Mashes E. I almost threw it away. Almost. Instead, I tucked it into my pocket and went down to the lower deck, where nobody ever went unless they were drunk or desperately avoiding someone. Which, frankly, described both of us. He was already there when I arrived, sitting on one of those round loungers in the shadow of the upper floors, sunglasses on, hands folded tight like he was bracing for a storm. You came, he said, voice low. Don't thank me, I said flatly. You get 5 minutes. He nodded. Took off his sunglasses. His eyes were puffy, red-rimmed. That threw me more than I wanted it to. I just want to explain, he said. You already did. I cut in. You have a fiancé. You never told her who you are. You let things happen with me knowing she existed. What else is there to say? He looked down, then back up. I didn't think it would go this far. That made me laugh. Cold, sharp. Which part? The sleeping with me part? Or the part where she shows up early and you still don't tell her? She knows, he said. My breath caught. I told her, he added. Last night. I blinked. You what? I told her everything, he said, voice raw. About you, about me, about the fact that I've been lying to her, and myself, for years. I sank down onto the bench opposite him, not meaning to. I just needed to sit. She took one look at you and put it together, he said. She asked me directly. I didn't lie. I told her. I searched his face, trying to find the catch. The joke. The excuse. And what did she say? I asked. She said. He rubbed his hands over his face. She said it made sense. My heart twisted. She said she's known for a long time, he continued. But she was hoping I'd figure it out before she had to be the one to walk away. Jesus, I muttered. He nodded, staring out at the waves. She's flying back tomorrow. We sat there in silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Eventually, I said, so what now? He looked at me. I don't know. That's not good enough. I know. I stood, pacing a little. My chest felt tight. I don't know if I can just fall back into this, I said. You hurt me, Eric. I know, he said again, and I'm sorry. I've never been more sorry for anything in my life. I turned to face him. You don't get to say that and expect it to fix anything. I don't, he said. I don't expect anything. I needed you to know the truth. He stood too, hands shoved deep in his pockets. I've spent years building a life I thought I was supposed to want. The job, the relationship, the plan. And then I met you, and... He stopped, shook his head. And suddenly, all of that felt fake. I swallowed. Hard. He stepped closer, not touching me. Just close enough that I could feel it. The pull. I didn't fall for you because I was confused, he said softly. I fell for you because you were real, because I could breathe around you. My eyes stung. But if you walk away, he added, I'll get it. I'll deserve it. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there, looking at him. This guy who'd lied to me, then told the truth, then ruined everything, and maybe tried to put it back together. The ship creaked around us. The water churned below. And the silence between us stretched until it didn't feel like silence anymore. It felt like a choice. I didn't answer him that day. After everything he said, I just nodded, barely, and walked away. My head was spinning. My body was heavy. And I didn't trust myself to speak without saying something I'd regret. The rest of the day passed in a weird haze. I kept thinking about Claire, what it must have been like to fly halfway across the world only to have the man you were going to marry look you in the eye and tell you he'd fallen for someone else. For a man. For me. I couldn't even picture the conversation. How much had she cried? Did she yell? Was she heartbroken? Or was she just tired? Tired of pretending they were still a fit. Tired of waiting for him to figure himself out. Because I knew that kind of exhaustion. I'd lived it. When I came out, I didn't do it for anyone else. I did it because hiding was killing me. Quietly, slowly, like paper burning at the edges. And hearing Eric say he'd been living like that for years, it messed with me more than I wanted to admit. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went up to the top deck after midnight, the one with the fake grass and the giant chessboard no one ever used. The sky was clear. The stars were endless. I sat on one of the benches near the railing, pulling my hoodie tighter around me. The ship hummed beneath my feet, slicing through the water like nothing had changed. Like people's lives weren't being rearranged in real time. I don't know how long I was sitting there before I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't even need to turn around to know it was him. Couldn't sleep either? Eric said quietly. I shook my head. He didn't ask if he could sit. He just did, leaving space between us, respectful, cautious, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to breathe near me yet. I talked to her again, he said after a while. Claire. I looked over at him. She booked a flight for the morning, he said. We ended it. I exhaled slowly. How'd she take it? He looked down, brushing a hand through his hair. Better than I deserved. She said she was proud of me, that she hopes I don't waste the chance. I stared at him. Chance? He nodded. To be honest, with myself, with you. I let that sit for a second. Then, Eric, I don't know what this is. I don't know what you want from me. He didn't flinch. I don't either. Not exactly. I just know that when I'm not around you, I feel like I'm missing something. My throat tightened. He kept talking. I know I can't ask for a clean slate. I know I hurt you. I know you don't trust me. Hell, I wouldn't trust me either. He laughed, almost bitterly, but then caught himself. But I meant what I said. I didn't fall into this because I was confused. You made me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. I looked away, eyes burning. I hated how much I wanted to believe him. I don't know what happens when we get off this ship, I said finally. This could all just be cruise brain, vacation delusion. The real world is messy. I know, he said, but I'm not going back to the life I had before. I already made that decision. A beat of silence. Then, softer. But I'd like to find out what life looks like with you in it. I turned to face him. There was no arrogance in his expression, no manipulation, just a kind of raw vulnerability that I hadn't seen from him before, that maybe no one had ever seen from him before. And for the first time in days, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a complete disaster, that maybe something real had sparked on that ridiculous, floating resort in the middle of the ocean. I let out a shaky breath. You're not exactly a safe bet, Eric. He gave a small, sad smile. I know, but I'm done playing it safe. We sat there, side by side, as the stars wheeled overhead and the sea whispered beneath us. Eventually, I leaned over. Just a little. Just enough to rest my head lightly on his shoulder. He didn't move. He didn't say a word. He just stayed there, warm and steady and quiet. And in that moment I thought, maybe this isn't the end of something. Maybe it's the start. The next morning felt like stepping into someone else's life. I woke up later than usual, the sun already high and streaming in through the narrow gap in my cabin curtains. The air smelled faintly of salt and sunscreen, and the motion of the ship was so steady I almost forgot we were moving. I lay there for a while, just staring at the ceiling, letting everything from the night before settle into my bones. Eric and I hadn't kissed. We hadn't touched, really. But somehow, that moment on the deck, me leaning into him, letting him be there, felt more intimate than anything we'd done before. It was the first time I'd allowed myself to stop bracing for the letdown. The first time I believed he wasn't going to pull away. Eventually, I dragged myself out of bed, showered, and wandered out to grab breakfast. I half expected to bump into him in the dining area, but he wasn't there. Just tourists, with sunburns and hangovers, shuffling around the buffet line like zombies. I grabbed a plate of fruit, sat by the window, and scrolled through my phone without really reading anything. Just waiting, thinking. At some point, I caught a glimpse of him walking outside by the pool deck, a coffee in hand, sunglasses on, head down. We didn't wave, but he saw me too. And I think, just from the look we exchanged, he knew I wasn't running anymore. We didn't spend the whole day together. It was like this unspoken agreement to take it slow, let the dust settle. But that night, after dinner, he knocked on my door. No note this time, no guilt in his eyes. "Want to go for a walk?" he asked. I nodded. We walked the length of the ship, barely speaking at first. Just side by side, the air warm, the sky turning that deep navy color it only hits right before full nightfall. Eventually, we ended up at that quiet bar on Deck 9 again, the place we'd first talked, the place it had all started. No live music this time, just the soft clink of glasses, the murmur of other conversations, and the occasional rush of laughter from a group playing cards at the back. We sat at the bar. Eric ordered us 2 gin and tonics without even asking. I gave him a look. "I pay attention," he said, smiling gently. We sipped our drinks in silence for a minute. Then I asked, "How are you holding up?" He took a breath. "Weirdly okay. Sad. But not in the way I thought I'd be. More like relieved." "Because you don't have to keep pretending?" He nodded. "Yeah. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm not pretending." He turned to me, face serious. "I didn't just come out to Claire. I came out to myself." I looked at him, really looked, and I saw it, the weight off his shoulders. The way he held himself now, like he wasn't trying to shrink or smooth himself into someone else's expectations. "Must be terrifying," I said. He let out a soft laugh. "It is." But so is not doing it. We finished our drinks. He paid. Then we walked back out into the open air. The stars were out again, the sea darker than ever. He reached for my hand. Hesitated. Then I gave it to him. We didn't say anything. We just walked, hand in hand, along the edge of the ship like we had all the time in the world. And for a little while, it felt like we did. Later that night, he came back to my cabin. There was no big moment, no dramatic declarations. Just the quiet, tentative way he stepped inside. The slow way we found our way to each other. Lips brushing, hands exploring, breath catching. This time it wasn't rushed or secret or wrapped in guilt. This time it was real. After, we lay there in the dark, tangled under the thin sheets, the sound of the ship slicing through water just outside our window. His fingers traced lazy lines on my chest. Mine rested on the curve of his back. "I don't know what comes next," he whispered. "I don't either," I said. "But I want to find out with you," he added. I turned to him, kissed him once, softly, then rested my forehead against his. "Then let's start there." The final days of the cruise passed in a blur, slow and fast at the same time, like those moments you try to savor but already feel slipping away. We didn't hide anymore. We didn't exactly put on a show either. But we stopped avoiding each other in public, stopped pretending to be just casual acquaintances who happened to eat breakfast together or laugh a little too much on the shuffleboard court. Now and then, I'd feel eyes on us. Maybe from people who'd seen us separately earlier in the week. Maybe even from someone who'd known Claire was here before, but no one said anything. And I didn't care. Something had shifted between us. It wasn't just that Eric had told the truth. It was that he finally seemed to be living like someone who'd let the truth all the way in. There was this one moment, mid-morning, the second to last day, where we were sitting on a bench near the back of the ship, watching the wake trail behind us. Eric was eating a mango popsicle like a 10-year-old, juice dripping down his wrist. I was teasing him for not grabbing a napkin. He looked at me laughing, his cheeks a little pink from the sun. And then, out of nowhere, his smile faded just a little. "What?" I asked. He shook his head, eyes still on me. "Nothing. Just, I don't remember the last time I felt this. This? Happy, free, like I'm allowed to want what I want." I didn't say anything. Just leaned in, kissed the mango juice from his skin, and rested my head on his shoulder. We stayed like that, quiet, the way you only can when there's nothing left to explain. But, of course, the ship had to dock eventually. On the final morning, I woke to find him already packing. The room looked smaller somehow. Like, now that everything was real, we didn't fit the same way we had in this floating bubble. He turned when he heard me stir. "Hey, hey." He sat on the bed beside me, his expression unreadable. "I hate this part," I nodded. "Yeah, me too. I don't want this to end." "It doesn't have to," I said carefully. He met my eyes. "I live in LA. You're in Chicago." "I know. We don't exactly have a blueprint for this." "Yeah, well," I said, smiling softly. "You're not exactly the kind of guy who used to color inside the lines." That made him laugh, but the heaviness didn't lift. We packed in silence for a while, each of us lost in our own swirl of thoughts. At customs, we got separated briefly. Long lines, crowded terminal, all that post-cruise chaos. When I finally caught up to him outside, he was standing on the curb, looking out at the buses and taxis like he was trying to figure out where to go next, not just physically, but in every sense. He turned when he saw me. So. He stepped closer. "This is the part where I should probably say goodbye." I hated that, even if it was true. I said, "It's the part where you say, 'I'll see you soon.'" His mouth twitched like he was trying not to hope too hard. "You'd want that?" I stepped closer. "Yeah, I would." He reached for my hand. "Then I will. I'll see you soon." We hugged, longer than was probably normal for two people standing in front of a line of taxis. When we pulled back, he cupped my face in his hands and kissed me, right there on the curb, like it didn't matter who was watching. And honestly, it didn't. Back home, things weren't suddenly perfect. Life didn't slow down for us. Reality crept back in fast. Work, routines, questions from friends. But he called, and I answered. We started texting, then FaceTiming, then making plans. He visited once, for a long weekend. Then I flew out to him a few weeks later. Every visit was different, but everyone made it clearer. This wasn't cruise brain. This was something real. Eventually he moved, not because I asked, because he wanted to. He said he'd spent too many years in someone else's story. He wanted to write his own now, with me. It took nearly 6 months for Eric to leave LA for good, not because he was dragging his feet, but because endings, real ones, are messier than most people admit. He had a lease to wrap up, family to navigate, a job to transition out of. But he did it. Slowly, carefully, like someone trying to make sure this time he was building something he actually wanted to keep. In that time, we weren't perfect. There were fights. Distance did that to you. Some nights I'd stare at my phone, wondering if the version of us that existed on the ship had just been some fantasy, Some fever dream built on sun and salt water and adrenaline. But then he'd call, or send a photo of something stupid. His breakfast, a ridiculous billboard he'd passed, a picture of a dog in sunglasses. And I'd remember, it was real. Because he was real. One night in October, he texted me while I was in line at the grocery store. Booked the truck. 2 weeks. That was it. No build-up, no dramatic flair. Just the quiet kind of certainty that leaves no room for doubt. When he finally arrived in Chicago, it was just after dusk. I heard the knock on my door and opened it to find him standing there with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and the exact same crooked smile he'd worn the first night we met at the cruise bar. "Hey," he said. "Hey." We didn't kiss right away. We just stood there looking at each other, both of us knowing exactly how far we'd come, not just in miles, but in honesty. "I didn't think I could do this," he said, stepping inside. I closed the door behind him. "And now?" He dropped his bag, wrapped his arms around me, and whispered, "Now I can't believe I ever lived without it." That night was the first time he slept in my bed without an expiration date. And it was different. There was no ocean humming beneath us, no deadline pressing on our shoulders. Just his breathing, slow and steady against my chest, and the quiet thrum of the city outside. The first few weeks were strange in all the ways we expected. He hated the cold. I made fun of his California layering system, hoodie under a windbreaker, no gloves, constantly underestimating Chicago wind. We argued about dumb things, how to load the dishwasher, whether or not his weird sleep sounds app was creepy. It was. And if pineapple had a rightful place on pizza, it does not, he insists otherwise. But we laughed more. Fell into routines that didn't feel like compromises. And when he found a new job, something smaller, more fulfilling, he told me it was the first time in his life that his personal and professional worlds weren't at war. One night, a couple of months into him living with me, we were on the couch watching a rerun of some awful reality show. I was half asleep, curled into him, my head on his shoulder. The apartment was dim, just the glow from the TV lighting his face. He shifted slightly and said, "You know, sometimes I still can't believe it." "Believe what?" I murmured. "That I get to have this." I looked up at him, studying the soft lines of his face. "You always did. You just had to choose it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he kissed my forehead and said, "Thank you for giving me the space to." And I realized he wasn't just talking about that night on the ship, or the conversations that followed, or the countless second chances I'd given him. He meant everything, the messy parts, the waiting, the faith. It's been almost 2 years since that cruise. We don't talk about it all the time, but it lives in the background like a shared secret, like a story only we really know the shape of. Sometimes, on random nights, he'll put on that old linen shirt he wore when we first met. I'll joke that he's trying to be sexy, and he'll say something like, "I just missed how I felt in this." We both know what he means. He means that version of himself, the one who let go, who stopped hiding, who let himself feel, the one who finally chose to be honest, with her, with himself, with me. There's a photo on our fridge, taken with one of those cheap disposable cameras they sold at the gift shop on the ship. We're standing at the railing of the upper deck, ocean stretching out behind us, both of us slightly sunburnt, smiling like idiots. It's a little blurry, a little overexposed, and Eric's arm is slung around my shoulder like it's always belonged there. I almost threw it away once. The day after Claire arrived, when everything came crashing down, I found it tucked into a drawer with a bunch of other random cruise memorabilia. I remember holding it in my hand, staring at the way we looked in that split second of joy and thinking, none of this was real. But I kept it. Because it was real. Even the mess. Even the heartbreak. Even the uncomfortable truth of how we started. That picture reminds me that life doesn't always give you neat beginnings. Sometimes it hands you a half-built bridge and asks if you're willing to take the first step without knowing how the other side will look. Eric took that step. So did I. And somewhere along the way, we stopped thinking in maybe and started living in now. We moved into a new apartment last spring. Bigger kitchen. A balcony. A couch that doesn't hurt your back after 15 minutes. On the first night in that place, we sat on the floor, eating Thai takeout out of cartons, the whole apartment still echoing and empty. He looked around, chopsticks in hand, and said, "This feels like a start." "It is," I said. He paused, then added, "Not just the apartment." I knew what he meant. We don't talk about Claire often. I think about her sometimes. What it must have been like to watch the person you love slowly disappear into someone they were never allowed to be around you. Eric told me once that she's in New York now, dating someone new. Happy, he hopes. I hope so too. Because none of this was about stealing something from her. It was about Eric finally giving something to himself. A few months ago, we went on another cruise. Just a short one. Bahamas again. Different line. Different ship. But as soon as we stepped on board, that same sea air hit us like déjà vu. The first night we wandered up to the top deck, standing by the railing as the ship pulled away from the dock. The sky was streaked with orange, the water catching every last drop of light. I leaned against him. "Feels familiar," he nodded. "Except this time, no lies, no secrets, no surprise fiancé." He laughed. "Definitely not." We stood there for a while, quiet, watching the land grow smaller. Then he said, "You know what I thought the first time I saw you?" I raised an eyebrow. "That I looked like a confused tourist?" "No," he said. "I thought, there you are." It knocked the breath out of me a little. The simplicity of it. The truth. Because that's what it felt like for me too. Not fireworks, not some over-the-top love-at-first-sight movie thing. Just, there you are. I'm here. We're here. And it's messy, and it's beautiful, and it's ours.